Hey there. Thank you for joining me. We're going to have some Friday fun today. First of all, I do want to acknowledge I got a haircut. I know it's a very drastic one. This is normally how my hair has been for several years. And now that things have really started reopening, I felt like it was finally time for me to get my hair cut. Um, this was originally going to be kind of about that reopening, and while I was going to acknowledge my haircut, I was going to focus on um, sports coming back, especially English soccer. The English Premier League has started back up, and I'm a Manchester United fan. And I was going to begin talking about that, but that's going to hold off for a week because I was reminded listening to a podcast this morning. Um, Today marks an incredibly important holiday, one that we often don't celebrate, but one that I think especially right now we need to be celebrating. And so I'm going to be talking about Juneteenth. It's a holiday I never heard of growing up. And I won't be surprised if a lot of you hear it and you're kind of like, what on earth is that? Maybe you've heard the word, but you're just kind of like, that's just something else entirely. But I don't know why it's not a national holiday. I don't know why more of our communities aren't celebrating it as a holiday, learning about its background. And I'm even amazed. We'll get into this, but Juneteenth hasn't been recognized in all states and all communities as the date to celebrate the purpose of the holiday. But I don't remember celebrating anything like this growing up, which blows me away now thinking about it. Um, the heart of this holiday is something that those of us in the United States should be celebrating every year, reminding ourselves of this holiday that is a huge step forward in the life of our country. But we'll get into all of that. I'm encouraging us all to have a good celebration, to have some fun with this. Juneteenth celebrates the ending of slavery in the United States. And I was listening to the podcast Pantsuit Politics. It has two women, one who is conservative in that she believes in small federal government, really limiting federal government power, what the Conservative Party has historically been about. She does not agree with where the Republican Party is going at the moment, but she sees that as the kind of conservative movement losing its focus. And then you have a liberal Democrat also hosting the show. It's hosted by two women. They generally do a very good job of not bringing up just a lot of outrage. They will disagree on stuff, and they're trying to point out that you should feel free to disagree when you're talking about politics. It doesn't need to be just one person has to be right, but in that debate we get better together. And they were talking about it, and they talked about their Emancipation Day celebrations where they live. And I was like, Emancipation Day? Like, I don't ever remember celebrating this. I don't remember talking about holding these as celebrations. Like, I remember talking in history classes about the Emancipation Proclamation, the ending of slavery in the United States, but not ever having celebrations about it like this. So that kind of blew me away. At the same time, like, that is a huge moment in our country's history. This moment where we finally said, no, all humans are people, and there's a long struggle to continue actually living that out. But that moment happened at the Emancipation Proclamation, and as that was rolled forward, and it just took me by surprise that I'd never celebrated this before. And I really encourage you to check out Pantsuit Politics. Their latest episode is on Juneteenth, and they will go into a whole lot more detail than I will. But they also pointed me to an article written by The Atlantic, and I have that pulled up here. This article is The Quintessential Americanness of Juneteenth, by Van Newkirk, and it was written in 2017. But it, especially starting off, it just really kind of summed up the great importance of Juneteenth and how extremely relevant it is for us. It starts off saying, Juneteenth has always been touched with irony. Although it is the most popular Emancipation Day holiday in the country, it marks neither the legal nor the de facto end of slavery in the country. The lesser-known Jubilee on New Year's Day more properly commemorates the Emancipation Proclamation, the 1863 executive order that technically freed enslaved people in the rebel states. Memorial Day, first celebrated by freedmen in April 1865, commemorates the end of that war and the lives lost fighting over the scourge of slavery. The end of slavery as it had been practiced came with the 13th Amendment, which on December 6, 1865, officially ended the institution and freed the last few humans who remained in chattel bondage under its bloody regime. That sums up really well kind of the murkiness of celebrating the end of slavery. And there were all sorts of holidays celebrated, some January, February, some in August. Memorial Day itself started kind of as this recognition of the war. It's now moved on to celebrating all veterans who've passed away. December 6th, 1865, another day that would be heralded as the ending of slavery. And other than Memorial Day, which is not necessarily a federal holiday about the ending of slavery, it's the only one of these dates that is kind of an official federal national holiday. Even now, with Juneteenth being brought into the national spotlight, it is not celebrated as a national holiday. There are a few states that don't celebrate it. There are other states that are now recognizing Juneteenth but have had the holiday at other dates other than June 19th. But the fact that I never heard of or thought about celebrating the ending of slavery in the United States, and why isn't there a holiday about this? I think it speaks a lot to our mindset in the United States. Because to celebrate Juneteenth is not just celebrating that slavery ended, but it's acknowledging that it happened. And we might pay lip service to that, but if we're celebrating, we just want to celebrate things that are only going to be happy and exciting, and we're like, yes, this is great, and so we'll celebrate the birth of our country, because of course we're going to celebrate something like that. We will celebrate a few figures, and as soon as we start to celebrate them, we remove any of the possible negativity around them, just celebrating our kind of inflated image of them. This is even true of things like St. Patrick's Day and Valentine's Day. Like, we create this story of how nice and kind, and we kind of trivialize the holidays to celebrate them, where to celebrate St. Patrick's Day and to celebrate Valentine's Day is celebrating two Christians who got brutally killed. And we distance them from what they really stood for, to the point that they would be willing to die. And the same happens with celebrating George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. And if you talk to African Americans about Martin Luther King Jr., they will let you know that the image that most of us think about, it's not quite there. But there's a little bit more about Juneteenth that I wanted to focus on. Newkirk continues on. Juneteenth rather celebrates a belated liberation. Enslaved people in the Confederacy who didn't manage to escape across Union lines or find themselves in occupied territory were not all made free by Lincoln's proclamation and had to wait until the end of the Civil War to take their first free breaths. In isolated Texas, word of the official end of fighting, the surrenders of Generals Robert E. Lee and Joseph E. Johnston, and the capture of President Jefferson Davis through May 1865 arrived late. Freedom finally came to Texas on June 19th of that year, after a proclamation by General Gordon Granger in Galveston solidified the emancipation of 250,000 enslaved people in the state. In its spread across the country and gradual supplanting of other emancipation celebrations, Juneteenth has always retained that sense of belatedness. It is the observance of a victory delayed, of foot-dragging and desperate resistance by white supremacy against the tide of human rights, and of a legal freedom trampled by the might of state violence. As the belated emancipation embedded in the holiday foretold generations of black codes, forced labor, racial terror, police brutality, and a century-long regime of Jim Crow, it also imbued the holiday with a sense of Sisyphean prospect of an abridged liberty, with full citizenship, always taunting and tantalizing, but just one more protest down the road. And we find ourselves still in the midst of these protests, in the midst of looking at African Americans who are not getting justice the way that we expected to, of the statements that were made when the Emancipation Proclamation was given, and when there was a decree in Galveston saying that all people will be equal and they will be given all rights exactly the way that all other people would be given. That was worded back at the order given in Galveston, Texas in 1865. And yet, that's still not quite the case. Justice doesn't get served the same based on the color of your skin. And I think celebrating Juneteenth, finding ways to celebrate, there's Juneteenth.com will give you ways to celebrate, how to celebrate it, some of the celebratory things about it. I will put this article from The Atlantic and a link to Pantsuit Politics and a link to Juneteenth.com in the description below. But I think focusing on celebrating this could be very important for us to move forward. To really say, yes, the United States, we went through an awful time, and we never should have had slavery at all, but we did. But guess what? We ended that practice and we moved forward, and using this as a holiday to say, hey, you know what? This has continued to be delayed. Like, we have made great strides and we have moved things forward, but just because things have moved forward doesn't mean they're where they should be. And we will continue celebrating the steps moving forward, and we will continue saying that even though things are going better, they aren't where they should be yet. Let's celebrate a holiday that is essential to our history within the United States. Let's celebrate Juneteenth, and let's celebrate the good that has come before us and the good that we still need to do. So I hope on this June 19th, on Juneteenth, you will have some fun today and celebrate Juneteenth. Find ways to celebrate. See if there are community celebrations going on. Thank you for joining me this week, and I hope that you guys can have some fun on this extra special Juneteenth Friday. God bless you guys. Bye.